Crash issue 23 had a controversial cover, being based on the horror movie Friday the 13th. This was the December 1985 issue, so Crash were reviewing the pre-Christmas smashes. There were a lot this month, with 9 out of the top 10 games receiving a Crash smash. Let's see what they were. In 10th place with 86% is Grumpy Gumphrey Super Sleuth from Gremlin Graphics. This is an arcade adventure style game in which you play a store detective who has set a variety of tasks around the store. One Crash reviewer liked it graphically but didn't find the game particularly playable, though they felt it may have potential for people who want to persist. The other reviewers generally liked it, one finding it worth the wait with professional presentation, and the other finding it graphically impressive with a lot of nice little touches. The smoothness of your play and the other characters to me is good, but apart from that I just don't find the graphics that attractive, and there's a fair bit of colour clash. It's not a bad little arcade adventure style, but they'd been a lot better done by this point in the Spectrum's life. Have a go if you enjoy arcade adventures. In 9th place is The Secret Diary of Adrien Mole, written by Level 9 and published by Mosaic Publishing. Like the Rats in issue 21, this game was reviewed twice. However, unusually it was both a Crash smash and not a Crash smash, only receiving 86% in the main magazine, but getting 9 out of 10 and an overall percentage of 90% in the Adventure Trail section. This is a multi-choice adventure game based on the 1982 book by Sue Townsend. In this you read Adrien Mole's diary entries and occasionally make choices to move the plot forward. Crash described it not so much as an adventure game and more a decision game. The pictures did not so much show locations as give an abstract representation of the happenings in the text. One reviewer found many of the choices and responses funny, but they did not think this made for a great game. However, others recommended it as one to try if you're bored with the norm. I'd not played the game before, but I read the book when I was a teenager. Actually, I think it's best not to regard this so much of a game as just an alternative way of reading the book. The options given are limited, and it's impossible to feel that you have any great agency through this. But the game is a good representation of the events and style of the book, so may be worthwhile taking a look at as an alternative to reading or rereading the original. There were 2 games in joint 7th place this month. The first, with a score of 9 out of 10, averaging 90%, and a Crash smash, is Terrormolinos from Melbourne House. This is a text adventure with some graphics, in which you go on a package holiday to Spain and have to take various photographs of the sights you see whilst there. Crash compared this game to Hampstead, being from the same publisher, and felt it to be a worthy successor, keeping up the standards of humour and user-friendliness seen in that game. They found the 2 best features of the game to be its sense of humour and the impressive postcard pictures you can take as you go through the game. They found it a superb adventure that will appeal to a very broad audience, and to be quite an easy game. The default character set makes the game feel dated, but where it does win is in its sense of humour. Making fun of the English package holiday is a jolly little game, mostly text, although there are pictures occasionally, and those that are there have the similar jaunty style to the text. For adventure fans, this is definitely a good change from the typical fantasy or science fiction plots of most text adventures of the time. Also in 7th place, again with a score of 90% and a Crash smash, is Critical Mass from Durell Software. This is an isometric 3D game in which you fly a rocket-propelled hovercraft above the surface of an asteroid, attempting to disable an antimatter converter before it reaches critical mass. Crash felt that Durell had once again set new standards in great graphics, good sound and compelling gameplay. They described it as one of the best shoot-'em-ups in memory, with detailed graphics which were small, but excellent overall. They gave this generally high scores and rated it as a very good shoot-'em-up that is fast, fun and furious. Although viewed from an isometric 3D perspective, this is essentially a 2D shooter game. Although sticking pretty much to a single colour, you don't really notice. The yellow gives the asteroid the feel of a desert, and the graphical style is superbly done. The real high point of this game is the animation's smoothness. It just feels exceptionally well polished. There may not be a great deal to the gameplay, but it's a game that's good fun and one I missed out on first time round. There are 3 games in joint 4th place. The first is Waterloo, written by KW Software. This game was given an overall score of 92% and a Crash smash. This game is a strategic simulation of the Napoleonic Battle of Waterloo. Crash found that the scrolling was very smooth when compared to other games of a similar nature. On the whole, they found it to be fast, playable and deceptively complicated. They summarised it as a classic game for a classic subject. With your units represented by large graphics, this is more reminiscent of the Bulge from issue 18 than of something like Stonkers. A different setting for a war-based strategy game, making a change from the typical World War II setting. A game for strategy fans, although perhaps not one for the casual gamer. Also in 4th place, released by Electric Dreams and written by Sandy White of 3D Anti-Attack fame, is Eye of the Mask. This game scored 92% and was given a Crash smash. This is a 3D maze game in first-person perspective, in which you have to construct a robot by finding various spares scattered around the maze. Crash found this to be a highly original and technically cunning game, with some of the most remarkable graphics seen on the Spectrum. They scored it 96% for graphics. They described it as deceptively subtle and attractive, containing far more than meets the eye. This game maybe doesn't have the classic status of Sandy White's earlier Anti-Attack, but I find it stands up well alongside other contemporary 3D first-person maze games, such as Gyroscope from issue 14. The gameplay can be somewhat confusing at times, and the sound is nothing more than annoying. Nevertheless, I find it a lot of fun, with you having to pay attention to both the first person view and the top-down map to get anywhere. This is not a game I've played before, but one that I enjoyed and would recommend. The final game in 4th place this month is Gyroscope from Melbourne House. Again, this was given 92% and a crash smash. This is a game in the style of arcade classic Marble Madness, but with you controlling a gyroscope that spins its way down a course. Crash described it as a brilliant game, difficult and frustrating at times, but well worth persevering with. They found the graphics of mixed quality with no attribute problems, but with some flicker due to the sound. They summarised it as a playable and addictive game. Although against the timer, this is a game that requires nerves as still and precision in your control. It reminds me somewhat of the board game Operation, in which precision is of the utmost, and one diversion either side of a small path leads to a penalty. I believe this is one of the first Marble Madness type games to come out for the ZX Spectrum, and whilst later variants were better graphically, this is certainly a good start, an addictive game, and one that I would recommend. We have 2 games in 2nd place this month, both crash smashes scoring 93%. The first is Tomahawk from Digital Integration. This was written by Dave Marshall, who wrote the original simulation Fighter Pilot from issue 2, and this is similar, although with you this time flying a helicopter. Crash felt that this was an improvement over the original Fighter Pilot. They liked the graphics with nice representations of enemy tanks and helicopters. Although easy to power up and fly the helicopter around, they found it tough to get right into once you start using the combat options, but felt that this was realistic. They liked the multitude of missions and combat sequences available. They recommended it more for simulation enthusiasts or flight maniacs, feeling that arcade addicts may find it a touch boring. Being a follow-up to Fighter Pilot, this game does have a similar graphical style. However, this is much more exciting with your helicopter being responsive and the sound being effective. For a helicopter simulation, I'd rate combat links from issue 10 as being slightly better. Nevertheless, the number of difficulty options available allow this game to be pitched to your skill well, and, despite the landscape lacking many features, is an enjoyable simulation. In 2nd place with a score of 93% and a crash smash is Back to School from Microsphere. This is a sequel to Microsphere's earlier game School Days, which reached the number 1 spot in issue 11. You'll again play the role of Eric, but this time you have a playground and girls' school to explore in addition to the boys' school of the original. The object of the game is to get your forged school report back into the headmaster's safe, although there are a number of tasks along the way to achieving this. Crash described this as a game that continues the formula of School Days but adds an extra dimension. They found the game playable from the word go, but one that would take a lot of practice to get anywhere. Like the original, it was a game that you could just mess around in to find out what you can do. They felt that the graphics improved on the original School Days, and that overall it was a fantastic game that was well worth the asking price. To me, this is an utterly brilliant game. This game kept the spirit of the original but gave you different tasks to do, and added to the playing area considerably. It was difficult to see how School Days could be surpassed, but Microsphere achieved it here. A game I owned at the time, played a lot, and have returned to many times since it was released. Yet another absolute classic. In 1st place with a score of 94% is Tau Ceti from CRL. This is a 3D first-person space shooter in which you fly a skimmer around Tau Ceti, exploring and collecting cooling rods to shut down the planet's main fusion reactor. Crash found this game to have some of the best filled-in graphics, with the shading that alters based on the position of the sun adding to the realism. They described Tau Ceti as being on par with classics such as Elite and Lords of Midnight. They described it as initially complex, though easy to get into once you have mastered the controls. They felt it captured the imagination brilliantly, and would be the kind of game that wouldn't date, and would be worthy of space on anyone's software rack. This is a fascinating game with a lot of depth and variety to it. The combination of arcade shooting and exploration is somewhat reminiscent of Elite, although the game has a very different feel, and the use of the ship's computer is a good way of providing additional functions without having to memorise too many different keys. This was not a game I'd played before, so Back to School rates higher in my mind. However, this is a compelling game that was a worthy crash smash, and is well worth playing. Just one special mention from me this month. This goes to the game Hacker, released by Activision. In this game you play a hacker who has inadvertently stumbled upon a computer system and hacks into it. The tagline to this game is, "You found your way in, but is there a way out?" The game instructions deliberately don't give you any more information than that, so it's a journey of discovery as you go through. Crash described this as a totally original game with an excellent theme and atmosphere. They found it well implemented and very addictive, but not fast-paced, and littered with puzzles and clues. Neither an arcade game nor an adventure, they felt it would probably appeal more to players that like think games rather than arcade fans. The graphics were colourful, although disappointing. The main criticisms were the lack of sound and the absence of any random elements. On the whole, they rated it a demanding and interesting game, giving it an overall score of 81%. This is a game I vaguely remember playing back in the day, so I wanted to try again. It may have been somewhat influenced by the classic 1980s film War Games. A nice mix of stages which individually wouldn't have been that thrilling, but I find work well to create an enjoyable experience. I'm less than convinced it will have long-term appeal, but I've enjoyed revisiting it. If you have enjoyed this, please like and subscribe to see more videos about retro games from Norlogic Retro.